Good evening, viewers. I welcome you all along with my colleague from Delhi University, Professor R.P. Rana, to this second session of our discussion. We were discussing in the first session state in medieval India, and we had discussed that about the nature of the Delhi Sultanate. And in this present session, we are going to discuss the nature of state under the Mughals. What was the nature and structure, and how the state evolved. 1526 is the landmark when in the Battle of Panipat, Ibrahim Lodi was defeated by Babur, and Babur laid the foundation of Mughal rule in India. If we take the very word Mughal is a corruption or corruption of Mongols. So the Mughals were coming from Central Asia. So the foremost and the most important issue is that whether the Mughals had the influence of both the Turks and the Mongol traditions or not. If we take the ancestry of Babur, then Babur himself was related with the Turk or the Amir Taimur, ancestors of Amir Taimur from his father's side, and from the great Khanate tradition, the Mongol tradition from his mother's side. So he was having the blood of both the Turkish and the Mongol tradition in his veins. So even Akbar always was boasting about his Central Asian and Mongolite descent. So here, if we trace the whether the Mughal state was borrowing the Turkish, Islamic, Persian or the Mongolite tradition. Before we are going to discuss in greater details how the Mughal rulers have acted, let us in brief, let me give you a brief that what actually the Mongol tradition or the Turkish traditions were, what were the major features of the Mongol tradition. First and the foremost important feature of the Mongol tradition was that the chief or the head of the Mongols were the great Khan. Like their counterpart in the Islamicate, the Caliph was the chief of the entire Islamic communities, but unlike the Caliph, who was a religious as well as the temporal or the political head of all the Islamic state, here the Mongol Khan, the great Khan, was not the religious head of the Mongols. He was the political and warrior head. He had no, even in his, he was an elected chief of the Mongol Khanate. The Kurultai or the assembly of the Khans, they used to elect and they used to sign and accept the suzerainty of the great Khan, and signature of the Kurultai, where all the Khans were the members of that assembly or Kurultai that was being known. They used to accept by signing, accepting the great Khan as the suzerainty. But so he, in the entire process of election, religion was not in any way, religion was not the important factor or the factor at all. So that way it was Mongol Khanate's position was different from the Caliph in the Islamicate. The empire was divided among the princes. These princes or Khans used to accept the suzerainty of the great Khan, but in their own territory they were the autonomous rulers. The second important feature was this partitioning of the state. as I just mentioned, that this entire empire was partitioned among the princes, and they were the autonomous rulers in their territory and accepting the nominal suzerainty of the great Khan. The third important feature of the Mongol tradition was that the heavy reliance on the Yasa of Genghis Khan, Yasa or Tura also it is known. This was the codes or codes on governance which were constructed, it is the Genghis Khan who has laid down these codes, or Tura or Yasa. So as far as Babar and Akbar all are concerned, they were following, they were boasting about their tradition. Even we get the reference of Tura in Tuzuk-e Jahangiri, but from Shah Jahan's reign onwards, and this impact of Tura gradually started fading away, and with the Aurangzeb's revivalism religious during that phase, you will find that impact of Mongol tradition was receding or almost receded. So these were the main features as far as the Turkish, the Mongol tradition was concerned. Now coming to the Turkish, what were the basic features of the Turkish tradition? The foremost the most important is the concept. Amir Temur believed in the concept of the absolute sovereignty. He argued, or he mentions, he said that since when there is one God, then its vice regent of God on earth should also be one only. So he had the concept of the absolute sovereignty. So here we can contrast that how the Mongols believed in the partitioning of the empire, though it is still we can debate it in detail, but just since I wanted to give you just the salient features, that's why I had given only the major features. So here Timurid polity was based on the absolute, gives the absolute part to the sovereign. Though historians argue that Amir Temur himself have never accepted the title beyond Amir, and it's only his successor Shah Rukh assumed the title of Padshah. But historians argue that it was the political need, because Timur himself never belonged to the clan of the Timurid clan, so he had he was not part of the Mongolid Genghis Khan tribe. He belonged to a distinct tribe, and assuming the status of Khan might have led to the rebellion of the entire Kurultai or other Khanate. So fearing that, he had never assumed the title of Padshah, and but he never paid much heed or much importance to neither to the Kurultai, and even after the death of the great Khan Mahmud in 1402, he has even not bothered to appoint any Khan. So the point that here I want to, which I would like to emphasize, that Timurid polity emphasizes upon the absolute nature. If we look at what how Babar was, which tradition Babar was following, Babar has never assumed the title of the Khan, but he assumed the title of Padshah. And when the when after Hussein Mirza's death in Central Asia, when his two sons succeeded or shared the sovereignty, then he expressed how come partnership is in a rule is unheard of. So all this shows that he was emphasizing upon the absolute nature of the sovereignty. However, if we see that the concept of Timurid polity, or whether they were following the Timurid tradition or Mongol tradition, it was put at test immediately after Babur's death, when Humayun partitioned his father's empire among his brothers and utterly failed in that. So Mongol tradition was not successful. For a short while you will find that when Akbar ascended the throne, immediately before that, Kamran's daughter, immediately after the battle of Uttargram, when this experiment again was very short-lived experiment, when Akbar as well as Kamran's daughter both were being declared as monarchs, but it was again a very short-lived. Otherwise, barring these two examples, we do not find that the Mughals' emphasis was on the absolute monarchy. So this way they were more tilted towards the Timurid polity. We will be discussing in little more detail how the historians have articulated on this concept of whether the polity was more Mughal polity was more tilted in favor of the Mongol tradition, or it was towards the Timurid tradition. Professor Rana, could you elaborate on the contemporary historians' viewpoint, that how they have viewed whether the Mughal polity was Turco-Mongol in nature or Turkish, or whether it was Mongol in nature? Professor Rana, please.
Okay, thank you. I think this issue was first discussed by R.P. Tripathi, the great historian, in his book Some Aspects of Muslim Administration. There, in fact, he said that it is the Mongol tradition which was basically dominant in the Mughal Empire. Now he says that, and he was comparing the Mughal state with the state of the Afghans which preceded them. He says that the fragmentation of power was inherent in the Afghan polity because of the very nature of this the tribal system, the nature of appanaging the state itself among members of the cognate members of the family. Now on this basis he says that the Mughal also followed it, and therefore he says that since this was inherently a source of it was inherently basically a system which discouraged centralization, because as relations of the Mughal royalty and the nobility were governed by Yasai Changeji, as you said,
yes, sir,
or Tura Changeji. Now the question here comes, whether the relations between the Mughal emperors and their nobility were governed by this Changeji system, these codes, or some other codes, which tradition, I think here again, and if they are sharing the Changeji system, then naturally the sovereignty had to be shared among lineage members, But if we go historically, I think it is only during and this question was in fact later on, this theory was refuted by Professor Iqtidar Alam Khan in his interesting essay on this, and he said that I think
Turco-Mongol theory of kingship,
entitled that is the title. That means he is basically saying that it was both, that now, as we have already stated, it seems that in times of trouble, when the emperors were facing problem, I think they were more leaned towards this course of Changes, and shared power with them. Not only, as you were saying earlier, that it has been happening earlier, but this tendency It was there during the first phase of this Akbar's also, when he allowed his, that first brother to continue ruling Kabul, this, he was sharing that power, But then, later on,
Mirza Hakim. Later on, but the political expediency showed that when Mirza Hakim rebelled.
No, not only political expediency, but the evolution of the Mughal nobility, under Akbar, was taking a different shape and moving in different, directions, etc. Because of that, it was not possible to share sovereignty these members, Mughals, in fact, later on they started, treating these people, as their now servants. Not as
even the experiment got failed, whether Humayun it was failed, and if we see that Babar has given this for one day water carrier to that Bhishti, he has Humayun, so that means they considered that it as a personal property, sovereignty as a personal property, and they were not basically believing in partition.
Yeah, that appears. Now, way back, in one interesting essay, one scholar who has been forgotten now, Francis William Buckler, he wrote one essay called Oriental Despot, where he propounded the theory of this corporate kingship, in relation to the Mughals, where nobles were treated as members and not as servants, Now, following from that, you will find that this is from Buckler's, this essay, you will find the development of this theme, by using a Weberian category, by Stephen Blake, in an essay called, in his book, on Shahjahanabad, where he says that the state, he also says that the state, in fact, assimilated was assimilated within the household, It was part of the state, it was assimilated within the household, and then you find that is why he was able to say that the entire kingdom, in fact, Shahjahanabad was a miniature kingdom, it was a miniature kingdom. Now the development of this type of works clearly shows that there was some kind of very intimate relationship between the king Padshah and his nobles, but not as members of the family, I think, that, but there was not much distance also. No, the distance.
Could we see then, you are arguing that the Weberian concept, taking the Weberian concept, Blake is arguing about that it was a household and patron-client relationship that he is speaking about. So, and the concept of the Bandagane Dargah that is being developed under, so you will not take the concept of Bandagane Dargah as the servants of
Dargah here means you are calling the Darbar as Dargah.
No, Bandagane Dargah. The student, the nobles were addressed as Bandagane Dargah, servants of the king.
Crown.
Yes, crown.
No, but there are other words also used for certain persons, which shows that they are not Bandagane Dargah again. For example, like Akbar called Man Singh as his Farzand, and he called this Bayram Khan as Baba. In fact, Aurangzeb himself called Mirza Raza Jai Singh as Baba, Baba. And then there was a system of this, this kokas, all these kokas within the family, kokaltas, that and also the system of this, the anagas, etc., foster mothers, etc. So there was a household at one place, but this household was not totally the entire state,
Could we then here little bit, if I can elaborate on, then if we can check that under the Delhi Sultan they were, can we trace this from this, that they were calling it Zil Allah, that means shadow of God on earth. Now if we see that how Abul Fazl articulated the theory of sovereignty, then how he is calling that emperor as Farrai Yazdi, means it was a divine concept of divine light, and so the divine, he is directly getting the light from the Almighty. Here it is very important that then the concept, because he is part of the Almighty, and then the concept of the paternal love and the whole concept of Sulakul, which has this concept of paternal addressing as the sons, or whether Bandegane Dargah, sons particularly. So that is what you are...
I think, we are mixing up two, three things, here. Let's put it more clearly, One thing is that this Abul Fazl is, when he is creating or, evolving a theory of, sovereignty or theory of state, his emphasis is on some kind of social contract, There is a theory of social contract in Abul Fazl, that there is a contract between the subjects and the emperor, and this contract is basically that the king will protect them and they have to pay revenue to him. This that sovereignty is a remunerative of protection. In
lieu of protection.
In this, but here, when we are bringing these issues of this ray of God or part of that son.
Because you were speaking about the patrimonial, and so sons.
No, here we basically, in his efforts to legitimize Akbar's rule, it's a very great legitimatory strategy which Abul Fazl is engaged in, and in this legitimatory strategy, what he is doing is basically that he is uprooting Akbar from the groove of Islam. It is Islam which was dominating every aspect of legitimacy. It is Islam which was a durable structure to legitimize these states, But Abul Fazl is uprooting Akbar from then, and this is very evident that all other chroniclers, you will find that they start the history of an emperor begin with Muhammad, But here is Abul Fazl who starts the history of Akbar's family from Adam, So it's universal, this is a universal concept of, it's not a religious concept of, sovereignty. It is basically universal sovereignty, because he starts his history from Adam himself.
So that's why here it is also important that how after issuing of Mahzar, that Akbar is declared as Mushtahid, means interpreter of Sharia. He was placed Imam Adil, so above the Sharia. So the what Akbar would be decreeing, his order should prevail even over Sharia, because of this his position declared in the Mahzar as Imam Adil and Mushtahid.
That Mahzar has been slightly misunderstood. Basically what he is saying, if there is a dispute,
in case of dispute between Sharia and so then because he is a Mushtahid, so he can.
So then but then suddenly he withdrew all these things, because this Mahzar and all these things does not find place, in any writing of Abul Fazl,
But
it's there only, it's only there in Muntakhabat Tarikh, he only reproduces, Other historians, they don't.
No, I was just bringing it in the context that how Abul Fazl was displaced, bringing that Islam was not important and the universal theory of concept of.
No, by the fact that he got this authority from these so many theologians, that means he accepted their authority there itself. That it is they who are declaring him, that's
Mushtahid.
Now, I think you are raising another issue which was about this. Let's come to the other.
Then first, so this is very important. One issue that it is not Turko and Magor. It is both the tradition they were following.
Both the tradition they were following.
Turkish and Magor both.
Turkish tradition started dominating with the stability of the empire, and during the period of trouble, usually head of the family accommodates, junior members of the family. So
that is more important. So then another issue related to the state was that it is particularly nature of the state, that it is argued that the Mughal Empire, particularly the entire Aligarh school, could you you can elaborate on that, what Aligarh school's argument is that that the Mughal state state was highly centralized bureaucratic empire. So which are the points that they argue about on that issue?
In the last some decades, there is a controversy about the centralization of the degree of centralization of the Mughal Empire, Mughal state, etc. The Aligarh historians, most of them, they have been, say, Irfan Habib, Athar Ali, and including, those who are not in Aligarh, say, even J.F. Richards and, Tapan Rai Chaudhary himself also, they have been arguing that it was a highly centralized state in terms of its spread and also in terms of its depth, that the state has penetrated the remotest corner of the empire. And the evidence which especially Professor Irfan Habib gives, of this is that, that even during the, throughout the heyday of the Mughal Empire, you will find that two things happening, that after every, interval of 3 to 4 years, a Jagirdar could be transferred, from Lahore to, Bengal, or from, say, from Kashmir to Deccan, etc. So that clearly shows that the writ of the Mughal Emperor was running, it could not be defied. That with the power they had, they could exercise on this uprooting, the Jagirdars from one place, one Jagir to another, to the remotest corner. That shows that the order of the Mughal Emperor were being obeyed by the nobility even in the remotest corner. It's not that the more away the Jagirdar is, that the authority of the state will peter away. That's they are saying it's not happening yet. So, secondly, both in terms of the creation of various systems, whether it is the administrative system, whether it is the mansab system, whether it is the currency system, this creation of these various systems.
Even the zabt, that and how Arabi, they have extensively, they have measured the area.
So that also clearly shows that, in fact, the widespread, use of these systems or implementation of these systems, that they are governing the countryside with the help of these systems and not with the help of local chieftains alone, So therefore, the Mughal, in fact, the writ of the Mughal state was reaching to these places. It was a highly centralized state in that sense, And in fact, Tapan Rai Chaudhary, in his that Cambridge Economic History volume, has said that it was an insatiable leviathan with unlimited appetite for resources, The degree with which they could, impose their, their authority, even in terms of collecting revenues or mobilizing
particularly
resources,
through zabt, which
etc. So therefore, these systematization of these institutions, there is a high degree of systematization of these institutions, and I think from that angle one can say that there was a considerable centralization of power. In fact, this, in fact,
but how, to what extent now the revisionists and others are arguing that actually what Aligarh school is saying, arguing about that, how, to which extent actually it was centralized and bureaucratic.
Actually, there are various strands within the revisionists.
Within the revisionists.
But the focus is, there is a consensus among them on one issue, saying that it was not a centralized state.
Not a centralized.
On that issue, they are basically all agreeing, Now, the basic, in fact, argument of these revisionist historians comes out very clearly in the volume edited by Sanjay Subramaniam and Muzaffar Alam, The Mughal State, in that volume, where in fact they are saying, through expressing a lot of things, through one sentence, they say that the Mughal state was a patchwork quilt rather than a wall-to-wall carpet, The patchwork quilt means, sadi fati hui, razai thi, matlab jo hai, it was not a wall-to-wall
various
carpet.
Elements put together.
No, I mean, its authority was not running throughout.
Not throughout.
It was, there are areas, in fact, where their authority was questioned, contested, and therefore, this is one way of saying, and this, in fact, has been reflected in the writings, Frank Perlin also. Frank Perlin also has likened the Mughal state with some kind of what he uses called the umbrella structure. That the Mughal state was some kind of umbrella structure, whereby he says that the existence of the Mughal state or the disappearance of the Mughal state in fact was not of great relevance so far as the society and the economy was concerned. Why it was not relevant? He says that between the peasants and the state there was what he calls a kind of intermediate intermediate strong structure, strata. It is this intermediate structure which was in fact running and controlling the society, and if the Mughals could manipulate them, then they could succeed. If the Mughals were not able to manipulate them, then they could not succeed. And therefore the alliance of the large number of these Rajput chiefs with the Mughals, and also the incorporation of a number of zamindars in various areas with the day-to-day everyday forms of governance at the local level. In fact, Parlin says that in fact it is these people who were basically running the state, and therefore Mughal state in fact was a kind of umbrella, and below that its authority was not running, it was just a...
But why you are forgetting Chetan Singh, who is his work is on 17th century Punjab, and he is also among the revisionists, we can say, and he is counter arguing all the three important aspects that Aligarh school has put forward. He says that as far as if we take the Zabt system, it was not as uniformly applicable as it is being argued by the Aligarh group of historian Irfan Habib and others. And the second important, they say that the measurement was almost complete uniform, that he also taking the case of Punjab, he clearly points out that it was not the case, it was not uniform. Then third important aspect, he says that on which the Aligarh school argues heavily, saying that it was it was a centralized structure, was the transfer of Jagis. He said that the Jagi transfer were not as frequent as it is being
I think there are on two counts, he has questioned the Aligarh historians, this formulation of a centralized state. And these two issues, as you have rightly identified, are basically, number one, in one article he said that he showed a very great longevity of the stay of some Jagirdars, some families there, and thereby he questioned that they were not frequently, transferred. So in a subsequent, I think, rejoinder, thoroughly, in fact, he corrected him and saying that he has wrongly identified some of the biographies of these, nobles. They are not the same person who are staying there. They are two different persons. So number one, that is. So therefore, maybe thoroughly in heaven must be still, waiting for that reply from Chetan Singh, whether it will come or not. He has never rejoined, in this debate with thoroughly on that issue. Number two, that issue of Zabt, it's not Zabt alone. He is basically saying that the extent of this so-called agrarian society, which the Aligarh historians talk about, it was not as extensive as they are talking about. In fact, the existence of tribal systems, outside this agrarian society was also quite considerable there, and therefore, to say that it is the agrarian society, basically agrarian system, which is sustaining the Mughal state, basically, if that system is not very extensive in Punjab, then how could it sustain, But I think there also this various groups, like I will give one example, and it's there in Chetan Singh's book himself, this Punjab during this positing of the empire, against a region, an area, a region, that it is a regional autonomy or regional formulations, which are so vibrant and so dynamic that they don't allow the imperial system to dominate it, So the regional assertion, and later on it's there reflected in others' writings also. Many others, subsequently during the 18th century, that it is the regions which are very important and regional systems, which are operating there. And this, in fact, argument has been taken to a very great, it has been taken to a high degree of, some kind of, eclecticism, by my colleague, Farhat Hassan, in his recent book, State and Locality in Mughal India, where he totally deprivileges the Mughal state, and highlights the state as if the state was in a passive structure, and in relation to the dynamism of the locality, locality which was more dynamic, and through this jargon of shared sovereignty, he has tried. I think in what way sovereignty was shared, it has to be known how it was shared. I mean, these notions of sovereignty, state, and this locality, in fact, they cannot be understood or analyzed basically by looking at the day-to-day governance, etc. Day-to-day governance, then you have to identify, and I think it would have been it could be understood by basically distancing himself from the centralized school and the complete decentralized school. He has brought a new, and this basically is the result of his lot of impact of Foucault on his writings. This Foucauldian notion of
on Farhat's writing.
Farhat's writing. Foucauldian notion of this controlling power. Now here you will find there are a lot of criticism of Foucault's writings on this issue, power, that but there also there is one important issue if one looks at it. Now one can say that there is a controller, there is a strategy of control, but Foucault never identifies the strategist. Here also, by deprivileging the state, he is removing the that strategy is there, strategy of governance, but who is the strategist? The strategist here is the state. And this is totally, by looking at this way, it will totally, in fact, goes in a way against another notion of the Mughal state, that it was a highly exploitative structure. That's about the Delhi Sultanate also. That's a Marxist understanding of the medieval state, that these states were highly exploitative, and total surplus was taken away by them. If they are highly exploitative and they are quite rapacious, structures, etc., then the notion of this sharing of sovereignty, if they are sharing sovereignty, then how they are oppressed, If you are taking away the entire surplus,
contradiction, inherent contradiction. Here we can also look at Chetan's argument that even what Chetan is arguing, the concept of Punjab that he is taking, he is the 17th century Punjab, he is equating with modern Punjab, while at the time that Punjab was having 3 different subas, and taking 3 different subas as one entity, and arguing that the transfers were within one region, one suba, that is completely erroneous. If a noble or Mansardar was transferred as a governor to the Suba of Delhi and from Suba Multan, then he can't be argued that he was within one Suba. Similarly, that same when he is arguing about that the Fajdars were developing roots within the region and rebelling and local religion and region, and that's why transfer of Jagir was almost practically ineffective. Now again here the same problem, the same Fajdars, if we see, then the Fajdar was transferred from Multan or Lahore Suba to Delhi Suba, or from Delhi to Lahore Suba, but he is taking the entire, all these 3 Suba as one single entity. So logically we cannot accept that. At least we have to accept to this extent, Aligarh school, that the transfer of Jagir were comparatively, religiously, effectively followed, and all the detailed data, if we see Professor Athar Ali's detailed apparatus of the empire, that transfers were made within 2 or 3 years. Even my work on Delhi Suba shows that, except that the phase when Aurangzeb shifted permanently to Deccan and he was facing the crisis, that it were the nobles, he was not getting the confident nobles, he was in the Deccan and he had to manage the entire North India. So getting the persons of confidence, that's why these transfers were not as frequent and and the governors were continued for 5 years or 7 years, in some case even 15 years. But that was a crisis situation, and prior to, even in the first phase.
No, I think even during that period, in my article, was there again
Delhi Suba, he was facing the real crisis, and some cases he was for 15 years when Noble was not.
So many Fawdars and these Subedars, they were transferred
frequently, but he was facing little bit, but till first phase we do not find.
No, even the second phase, when the Jat uprising was taking place at that time, to deal with the Jats, frequently he changed, this Subedars and Fawdars, etc. of Mathura, of this area, this Agra itself, Mathura and.
But in Delhi Suba period little longer, but it is interesting to find that even in the second phase he was where the rebellions were. He was.
And even the area of this Fawdars of Ranthambore and Chatsu and all these Alwar, etc. Or they were frequently.
And even Chetan's argument that Arazi was not complete. Arazi was almost extensively, by coming to Aurangzeb's period, it was quite 90%, at least my analysis on Delhi Suba, so almost 95% of the area was measured. Arazi means it's a measured area, so it was a measured area. So this is not.
So you are basically saying that this large area had also been brought under measurement. That also shows that how effectively these people were measuring the local resources, etc., productivity and all these things of land, and thereby in fact basing their taxes on that.
But if we take Chetan's argument on center and periphery, then definitely in the peripheral areas, zamindars were comparatively, they had the opportunity. If we see that even the retainers, armed retainers that were being maintained by the zamindars in the peripheral area, were comparatively much larger. To that extent we can accept.
I think the peripheral areas, we have the knowledge of the Zamindars from Aine Akbari, and the peripheral, Subas, they came to the Mughal Empire, under the Mughal Empire later, so we don't have any information about them, from that, So therefore, there also, we can't say that in the peripheral area, see, one argument can spring from it, and that is that it's not that in one day the Zamindars surrendered or accepted the authority of the Mughals and it continued very nicely throughout, it's not, because the relations between the Zamindars and the Mughals were always remained tense, and therefore the state was always renegotiating,
even taking the case of Jats, since you have worked extensively on taking the case of Jats, how effective Mughal control was?
Mughal control was, during the...
because it was Agra Suba, Agra Delhi Suba, and...
No, we are talking about at a time when the entire area had become Zor Talab,
Zor Talab.
So, at that time, authority was eroding, but that is the time when Mughal authority itself throughout the country was weakening, later on, So
you accept that second phase, this was the crisis period. From the second phase of Aurangzeb's period,
I think, and that this basically also can be, linked with, what Bernier says that, that under Aurangzeb, this Muslim dimension of the, dimension of the state was being re-emphasized, it was being, vigorously, imposed, and because of that also, it's reflected in the alienation of the Rajputs also from the Mughals,
But if you see that the percentage of Rajput, even Mirza Raja Jai Singh, Jaswant Singh, highest got the highest officers, 7,000, 7,000.
I'm talking
after Jaswant Singh.
Rathod rebellion, and then this crisis, in Bahadur Shah's time, that crisis, when Jodhpur and Amber were brought under under Khalisa. I'm talking about that phase, that. So I'm saying that the state was always negotiating, there was a negotiations were always going on, and but still the authority of the Mughal emperor, its authority of the Mughal emperor continued even up to 1857.
So we can conclude the session with saying that as far as the authority of the central power or authority of the Mughal emperors were concerned, it continued even up to as late as 1857. He was accepted even during the rebellion, 1857 rebellion. Bahadur Shah Zafar was accepted as the monarch, and Badshah Badshah of Emperor of India. So it was there. So contesting authorities were there, but as far as absolute, it was in absolute terms. Even if it you will not say that it was to which extent it was a centralized bureaucratic empire, but the authority of the throughout the 17th century, it was the authority of the monarch was and the empire was highly centralized bureaucratic. You go with Aligarh school.
Yeah, it was a despotic monarchy.
Despotic monarchy. So with these words that Mughal empire was highly centralized bureaucratic, and now the new researches are emphasizing upon the revisionist school that is being that it was not as highly centralized bureaucratic as it is being presented by Aligarh school. With these words, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much.